Okay, so Friday we talked briefly about this application, building a to-do list. I don't know how many people actually even started that, let alone finished it. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to build it together. Because I realize there's a bit of process here that maybe some people aren't quite used to, and so I think it'd be helpful if we just sort of walk through how you build something like this, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the code, but you guys are going to tell me what you want to do, okay? So I will help, but really it's going to be you guys building it, okay? So we have this, this application that we want to build, and I made a little wireframe, and it has a description of what it should do. And there's a lot of ways we could approach how to build this. So what do you think we should start with if we want to build this app? Any suggestions? Yeah.
I was just waiting to see if anybody else had anything, but I would start with like building the HTML, like just sort of like let me see what it looks like, and then from there, because I could test an HTML page real easy, and then from that I would take it and make that my Go template. So and then I'd start trying to do the Go code, each piece, like okay, what's the first thing I needed to do, and try to get that one little piece working. Like I just wanted to render the template, that'd be the next thing I do after that. So that's kind of the process I use when I was trying to work through it over the weekend.
No, I think that's a good idea, because if you're comfortable with the front end, then maybe that's a great place to start. And the important thing with an application like this is sometimes people, they get sort of the deer in the headlights look of like, where do I even start? And if you start with what you know and build that, get that working, and then you can add in the extra pieces, right? And so that is a good strategy. So let's just go ahead and try to do that. So I created a to-dos folder, week 3, day 1 to-dos. And so we will make a folder in here called assets. And inside of there, we're going to create a templates folder. And that's where we'll put our HTML. So I will create a new file. And I'm just going to go ahead and call it index.go.html, but we're just going to start with HTML, okay? Is everybody following? And if you guys want, you can write what I'm writing. I'll try not to go too quick. So, we do all the standard HTML stuff. Okay, so what should we put inside of our page here?
I've got some stuff up on Scratch. You just want to grab what I put together. That's the whole thing, yeah.
That's a lot of stuff.
Show it, I'm proud of it.
Okay, so come back to the CSS.
No, Font Awesome, which serves from the Bootstrap CDN. I'm breaking down. I just need it to be easy.
Is that a valid tag?
Me? Yes.
Me? Yeah.
Yeah, it's HTML5.
No. Okay.
Another one of their semantic things.
But okay, article. Yeah, I don't know if I would use those for that, but it's okay. And then you just have an H1 and then the section. Add item. Okay, so everybody familiar with Font Awesome? You add these classes and it makes an icon, so that's convenient. And then this is JavaScript, so we'll come back to that. But really simple here. How are you drawing the, right, so you have the title, so this is a button, right, basically?
Yeah, each, the H2 is where you enter your to-do item, and I made it content editable, so you could eventually enter one if it's the new item, the ID new item, or you could edit them if it's a current one, and then it'd process the update for the edit. So the button is clicking on it. I was going to do that with JavaScript, just like, maybe when it loses focus, or when you click on the Font Awesome button, that would be the button. So I didn't use forms, but just event listeners.
So why that instead of the text input?
I was just kind of interested in learning more about content editable and seeing if I could get it work that way. And the form, using the form, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so
But you know, change it up, man, mix it up.
Oh no, it's fine. I mean, we don't have to change it. It's just asking a question. So then you have your JavaScript. Does everybody understand? You put the script at the bottom of the page. All this HTML is going to exist, and then it runs a script, and it always runs it like sequentially. So you know, it's going to run this immediately before it even gets to the end of the body here. So this is in general a strategy we use to not have to have an onload listener. We just throw the script at the bottom of the page, and then we know these elements already exist. So that's why I put a script at the bottom, which looks weird because you're used to seeing it up here, but it works. Okay, so you do this. That gets your item. That's this guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so on focus, you clear out the text. Is that what you do?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
the set timer?
Because if I just did the focus without the set timeout, it would clear it, but it wouldn't set the cursor. And so I just Googled it, and apparently if you put in a little bit of delay from when the focus occurs to when you clear the content, it'll then set your cursor. So you can see the way it was before, 94 through 97, and that didn't work. So it'd clear the text, but it wouldn't set the cursor. But then 88 through 92 clears it and sets the cursor.
Okay. Okay, so you click that, and then if you click the article itself.
Yeah, so that just adds it to the whole, to-do list. And then I check for what got clicked, and if the new item got clicked, then
Wait, aren't you doing that here though? Or you
yeah,
just
but this was I was gonna have it like, let me see here, new, and it still equals add item. So they tried to click the button to submit it when it says add item still. It'd say, well, you got to enter it, right? Because you haven't changed it from the default text of add item. And
Okay.
does that make sense? And then down here, I was gonna, when it's new and it's not equal to add item, meaning they changed the text of a new item, then that would submit the data to send back to the server to process it via JSON.
Okay. So you're not filling the list?
No, I didn't get it working.
Okay.
That's as far as I got with the HTML and JavaScript.
So the thing I expected to see here a list, like a UL or something.
I was thinking it would iterate, so that would be the new item, and then I just copy the section thing and do a range over the data I passed in. So for all of the to-do items, I'd have new sections, but
Wait, you want a section for each item?
yeah.
Okay. We can do that. So you're thinking they would go here?
Yeah.
Let's give it an ID.
Yeah.
Just because it makes it easier in JavaScript. So let's create a function. I'm going to call it render items. You give it is like text, blah, something like that. Maybe there's an ID. So that's what we're going to expect in there. So what should I do here? So the intention of this function is to fill that item div with the data I get here, the array of.
Maybe create elements and then append them to div items, or
Step one would be getting the items div.
Yeah.
oh, you have to do the JSON receive it.
Not even that, you got query flare.
And what I would do is I would clear it. So I'm just going to erase it every time, and then add it. So it's a full replace every time. because likely the way we're going to get the data from the server is the full list. So it just makes it easier if I start from scratch each time, you know? So, everybody follow that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to loop over the list.
What would be the option?
What would be the what?
What would be the alternative?
The alternative would be you only get the newest one and you append it, or you get all of them, traverse the things that are already in there, and check each one to see if it's in this list. But that's a complicated algorithm to write, so, but you can do it. It's just, you know what I mean? Like you'd have to do a looping over all the things in there already, comparing them to the things in here. If they're different, insert it. If the one there is not inside this list, remove it. I mean, it'd be complicated. But yeah, you could do that.
Is the list taking stuff that you're already done with? I mean,
You're getting your to-do list, all the items that come from the server.
yeah.
Like,
So what else is there? I mean, you're saying loop through and pull out.
I see what you're saying. So the first time this is run, it is empty. That div is empty. But then when we add one, we'll call go get the list again, and then we'll re-render. And at that point, there will be stuff in there. And so, so I'm just making it so that it always clears. You always start from scratch, and that'll just be easier for us. But so we loop over the items, and we got to build a section. So create element. And what is section going to have in it?
an H2 and
Okay. And what the H2 has inner text of the text content, sorry.
yeah.
I guess we're going to call it text. Is that look right?
Yeah.
What else do we need to have?
The H2, if you want to have the editable, needs an ID.
I mean, the original requirements did not require the ability
Yeah,
to
so
edit.
let's not do that.
Um,
So, and then a button to remove it.
okay.
So it needs to add the minus circle from 81, line 81.
I don't know if this is actually. Like that.
Yeah, perfect.
Well, except this is going to be a. What is it?
Oh,
Times or something? No.
no, there's sorry, I've got plus on both. It's 81's got the minus there.
Oh, minus circle. Okay, and then we'll add that to the button. And child I, and then section of n child. Building HTML this way is very tedious. It is what it is. Okay, so that will create our section. We have to add the section to the. I think that will work.
Oh, okay, cool, I see what you did.
Am I missing anything? You
No.
know, you can stare at this code and try to figure it out, but your best option is usually to run it. So,
Yeah.
So let's try that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to call and give it some fake data. Right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to open this Drew little arrow. Ooh, that's very pretty.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so it did draw your example. It didn't draw the circle. Why didn't it draw the?
Maybe I have a. No, that should all work. Is the pulling it off the CDN not local?
It's not there.
The only thing that's missing is the reset. You can take that line out.
Oh, this didn't work. I know why it didn't work. Can't use those // URLs when you're in a file. There we go. Okay. So we have to make that work. I click the minus. So we need an event for that. So how should we do that? So in other words, I click minus, nothing happens right now.
Add an event listener.
Yeah.
And I thought, when Ray was here, he was saying, don't add it to every single item. Add it to the whole container, and then get the eTarget ID to figure out which item you're working on. That way it's more
Sure, we can do
performant.
that. General performance on the front end doesn't matter that much because you have this computer available at your disposal and just one person, but
That's true.
it's worth doing. I think it's false. So what do we want to do in there? So I click the section.
Well, I think that each of those items, if you're going to delete one, you have to have an ID set in each of the items. So if you click the minus button, 107, right?
What do you want to set it to?
That needs to come in from our data, so items I.id.
Okay, that's going to cause us issues. Pretty sure that's going to be a number. I don't think you can use a number in ID. But maybe you can. We can try it and see what happens. So I will add ID down here.
Well, if it's coming through as a JSON, though, couldn't we just cast that? The
I know.
items to a plus sign in front of
I've
it?
never used a number as an ID, so I guess we'll see what happens. So you click it, and now we have an ID. You're saying we should be able to do like that?
Yeah, I think it's just a event target ID.
Yeah, you can do that too.
I think that is, either one.
What do we want to do with it?
Or Paul. Then we want to do the JSON to send it back to Go or do the Ajax to send it back to Go. Oh, thanks, man. And then
So I copied this from below. What is it going to look like here? So I think we don't need to send all this. We can just send ID.
Yeah.
But this probably isn't right. What should this be?
Should be send.
Send is right there, 1 or 2.
Um,
You should use delete.
I couldn't get delete to work when I was trying it.
Really?
Yeah, it wouldn't even go through, it wouldn't get through the serve max.
Well, we'll see if
Well,
that
we'll
works.
try, yeah.
It should work. So what's missing here?
Will it just leave an empty space where that one was, or will it reorganize the list?
So I'll show you what's missing. Why isn't it drawing? Oh, cannot read property ID undefined. Didn't I add it? Oh, yeah, don't name it I. That's a terrible name. I overwrote the iterator. That's an example of a kind of bug that will, you'll tear your hair out for hours, and then you'll look at it and be like, oh. And this is why Go enforces it, because in Go you would not have been allowed to do that. But in JavaScript you can do it, and it's like, oh, I see now. But anyway.
Good man, Paul.
Fueling.
You're a good man.
Hey, no sweat, sir.
So, I mean, obviously this isn't working, but the issue is it's not removing it, right? So we didn't add that code, so we need to do that. So, we're not removing the element.
Well, when you get to your Go code, you could just process the delete and then do a redirect, which reloads all the elements.
Yeah, you can't do that in the Go code, because that's an API call, and so the redirect will be hit by this AJAX call, and then we'll redirect the page. So we have to do it in the JavaScript. And so,
Wait, see that Go part again? How come it couldn't just...
so what will happen is you try to delete, and then you'll do a redirect on the server, and that will redirect the AJAX call. But it won't affect the page that's running the AJAX call. Okay? The redirect is for the AJAX call, not for the whole page. You have to do the redirect in JavaScript to make the whole page redirect, right? I mean, if that doesn't make sense, we can do it, and I can show you what will happen.
Let me just show me the error of my thinking, but line 102 sends that to the server, right?
Yeah?
And then the server gets that and says, okay, if something comes in at root with the delete, and that's the HTTP verb, HTTP
Yeah, verb or method.
method, something comes in with that, then I'm going to run this chunk of code here and Go, and that will like take it out of the server. And then once it's done that inside Go, couldn't I then do a redirect back to root with a get?
Sure, we can try that.
And then that would come down and run the entire thing where it cleared the whole list again and rebuild the list from the current data, which has one less item now, so it built with one less item.
We can try that.
Yeah, the problem is that normally when you're taking the URL, the response goes to the web browser, but this time we're taking the signal with the AJAX, so the response is going back to the JavaScript, not the web browser. So it's the JavaScript's responsibility to determine what to do with that response, as opposed to the web browser when you just do a normal call.
I don't understand that.
We'll see it, and then it'll all make a lot of sense. Okay, so I'm just going to change this to text to be consistent, but otherwise I'm leaving it the same. Not text over. Otherwise I'm keeping it the same. I see a couple issues, but we'll just discover them. So maybe at this point we have HTML, we're drawing it and stuff, and we hooked up some buttons. So maybe the next step will just try to make the server part, huh? Does that make sense for everybody? So we'll do that over here. Data-go file. Remember, the package doesn't matter because it's App Engine. Okay, so what do I need to do here? Nobody remember how to do this? I say http.handle func. So here we're going to create our routes. We're going to define the routes available for our web server. So what are the routes I need? I mean, I think we need, if I were to draw these, if I go to slash, then that's going to go to the HTML, right? If I go to, and that's a get. If I post the slash, what should that do?
Should add to happen data store.
Yeah, create to do. And then if I delete,
Delete to do.
yeah. Are there other URLs I should have? I think we should have a file server.
Yeah, for like CSS and assets.
So how do we do the file server? Does anybody remember how to do that? And you're welcome to paste the code into Scratch if that's easier.
Sorry.
HTTP handle, not handle product.
So,
What is that? HTTP was a strict prefix.
yep.
URL, then HTTP, and the second argument was HTTP file server. Of course. Which takes an argument HTTP dirt.
Something like
Awesome,
that.
Daniel.
That's good. You don't have to memorize that. If you could look at the example of the docs. But if you type it enough times, you may just remember how to do it. I think that's probably right. We'll test it in a second to make sure. Actually, we can test it right now. So I think an important like process note when you're doing an application like this, you're sort of like, okay, I'm going to build this part. You can test that part in isolation and make sure that your reasoning is correct. And if you test as you build, you will find it's much easier than if you wait till the very end. In other words, don't write 1,000 lines of code and then see if it works, because you're going to spend all day trying to figure out where it's broken. But if you take it step by step, I know if this is wrong, this is the only place it could be wrong, it's line 6, right? And so it's really easy for me to fix that and then move on, right? So let's see if that works. So I will go to boot camp examples, week 3, day 1 to-dos, which is like a crazy path, but that is where we are. Oh, we forgot something. No app yet. So let's make that. I'm just going to copy it. Because I don't remember my ID, but we'll walk through it again. So that ID would be your project ID and App Engine. These are pretty pre-canned, pretty much. I mean, the version would change, but we're not going to do that. I buy that. You guys agree with login required?
Yeah.
Okay. So all this makes sense? Any questions about the app YAML? Okay. So I added that, so now I can run the server. And I can go to, well, instead of this, I can say localhost 80. Okay. 404, that's expected because I haven't created any routes yet, right? But if I go to /assets, /templates, /index.cohtml, I should get HTML.
Yeah.
Okay. So the assets I think are working. Everybody buy that? Okay. Now we can start working on our other routes. Now because we're using the default surfmux, the surfmux doesn't route based on the method. It routes based on the path. And so all of our 3 sort of endpoints are on the same path, but use different methods. So I think what we want to do, and I'll do it below, I'll make a handle index function. Do you guys remember this is going to be an HTTP response handler function? So do you guys remember the arguments?
It's RES, HTTP, response writer, comma, request, and a pointer to an HTTP
Perfect.
Request.
So we'll create that, and then we'll put that in here. Okay. So I think we should use a switch, and we should switch on the rec dot, is it method? So I think we should have a get code. Okay, and so,
Possibly default, maybe.
yeah, I guess for other verbs, what should we do if that happens?
Probably HTTP error.
We could do
Send
that.
back
Actually, there is a special error code for that.
400 bad request.
405 or something?
I don't know about that.
Method not allowed. I think that's something like that. There it is, 405. So we can do that.
That's cool.
Okay. Speaking of which, I think there's something we should do before line 12. What if I go to slash whatever? What happens in the way this is written right now?
Whatever serves for line 8.
We want it to do a 404, but it goes to handle index because the way the routing works is if it ends in a slash, it handles everything below it, right? And so what it'll do is it'll go to assets if that's available. If it's not assets, then everything goes to handle index. So I think the first thing we want to do is say, if URL.path is not equal slash, then we want to say not found. I forget what it takes, right? Everybody understand that? Yeah. Yeah. So that's, we would probably have figured that out. Or maybe we wouldn't have because we would never test it. Just know that if you do the special root URL, you usually need to add this bit of code.
For a second, I thought you were erasing code. It trips me.
I know, when I draw, I'm
Wait, don't erase that.
look at delete, and it's like, wait, part of this is the screen and part of this is the, yeah, it's a little confusing. It'd be cool if it worked like that, but maybe one day. Not there yet. Okay, so let's start with the get. What should the get do?
It has to grab all your stuff from App Engine Data Store.
So here's an interesting problem. We didn't write that in here, did we? It never goes and fetches. All we did was make the rendering code, but we never wrote the AJAX for it, right?
Where is that here list?
And what path would it use
there
too?
it is, yeah.
Because we've got root as
So-
HTML, so what path? would
Yep,
it
that's a
use?
problem. So I think we need get items. So I think we're going to need that function. And I think because of this problem you just said, that means our get route is it's doing two things. It's giving us the HTML, but it's also supposed to give us, the list. So we could do that if we wanted. What we could do is we could look for the accept content type the user passes, and we could change our AJAX call to pass that in. And so if it came through as an application JSON, then we'd give the list. Otherwise, we'd give the HTML. I think that's super confusing, so I don't think we should do that. I think instead what we should do is change the URL structure. So get slash will go to the HTML, but let's use a different URL for the AJAX. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I use todo.json.
Okay, we can do that. So we have our handle index, and we'll add, let's call it handle to-dos, and that'll be slash todo.json. Is that what you said?
Yep.
We can do that. So we'll just copy this guy. To-dos. We don't need this anymore because he only handles one URL, but we still need to get post delete, and now we don't need that here, right? Okay. So this will be our API stuff, and this will be our HTML stuff. Everybody follow that?
Okay.
So what should we put in our, since we're in the index here?
Parse template, all that.
We could, we're not actually using the template, are we? We don't have any template stuff in here.
Or you can pull the 405 and hit slash.
Yeah, we could add that back in, this guy, but I don't know, we don't have to. I think what we can do here is rename this to HTML, because we don't have any template stuff in there, and just serve file. Okay? So, you guys remember serve file?
Oh yeah, because
I forget what it takes. Name. That's easy. assets, template, index.html. So, does that make sense? I think that's probably easier than doing the template, because we're not using the template as a template, so why bother parsing it? We'll just serve it as a file. Let's see if that works. So if we go here, we should get, okay, so now we're serving the contents of that file from the slash, you know, instead of as a file. So I think that's enough for that guy. He's just serving HTML, so we'll skip him. Now for the API stuff. So what should they get to? If I get /todo.json, what should I do?
That's where you're grabbing all your data from the data store.
Yeah.
And then
So
that's it as JSON.
let's do that. So first we can create an App Engine context. Type new context. Is it rec?
Request.
Look at that. And then we need a data store. I don't remember how to do that.
Those are all methods. The data store stuff's all methods.
It's all functions, okay. So it's like,
I did data store new query.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good idea. Let's go find the docs. There we go. So here's a good example you can find in the docs of how to use it. So give it a kind. So what's the kind doing? A to-do maybe?
Yeah, I call mine to do.
Okay.
I actually ended up calling it to-dos, and then later I was trying to do something else, I call it to-trace.
Oh, okay.
From to-dos to to-trace.
Yeah, so I think generally the kind should be singular, or whatever that's worth. But it's up to you. I mean, it's arbitrary. This is the kind of debates that database people get into endlessly. Should table names be plural or singular?
Such important.
It's like arguing over the semicolons. Who cares?
Such important questions in life.
There's two hard things in computer science.
The naming or caching and naming things.
Yeah, clearing cache and naming things.
So that returns a query object.
Right, and I think well, here's the question. I don't want all the to-dos, I want my to-dos. I want the to-dos associated with the current user, right? Because remember, we required the login, so we're going to have a user. And this is going to give me the wrong user.
User.current.
Current, that's right. Not that user. Okay. And so, how would we get the to-dos associated with the current user?
Gotta add a filter.
Okay.
It would have an extra item on the in the struct for like a owner or something.
Okay, so we haven't even created that. So I think what we should do is make a struct, right? We should have here a struct for that, right? And so you're saying that you think there should be like a username field?
Yeah. Or email, since that one's unique.
Yeah, let's do email. What else should to-do have?
You should have your description, or you were calling it
text.
item
Text,
text, yeah. And then an ID or the ID gets automatically created by
It does get automatically created.
App Engine. But then if you're gonna pass your struct and marshal it, you want to pass your ID, doesn't it have to be inside the struct so that you can then use the ID over on the HTML? So
Yep.
you gotta stick your ID in there.
U in 64? We'll see what that is. Okay, so I think you're right. Probably need an ID in there. Okay, so we're going to say filter. And you give the column name, which will be email equal. And then the value, which I think is u.email. Or it's, yeah, okay. So that will filter the list of to-dos by the email address. And then we can say run. So I'm going to call that iterator and then the way it works is you say .next, and you give it the thing to fill. So the general structure is to do, iterator.next, ampersand to do, and that returns an error. And if error equal, I think it's, what is it, data store.done, then you just break. And if error is equal to anything else, what should we do?
Send back an HTTP.
Yeah. Okay, so I should mention, some people would argue this is not a good pattern, and they have a good point. Why might you not want to do this?
Do you really want to be telling your users what your error is?
Exactly. And so some people think this is compromising your security. In this case, I think it doesn't matter much, but I can understand why. Because now you're exposing to the user that maybe it says data store unable to connect to data source. And so now they know you're using data store, whereas maybe they didn't know that before. And so some people would say you should never surface errors. In fact, what you should say is error, and give no details whatsoever to your user, so they can't get any information about what went wrong. An interesting compromise, and I've seen sites like YouTube do this, encrypt the error as a block of text. So when the user takes a screenshot of the error and sends it to you, you can decrypt the block of text and see what the error was. But they don't know what it was. It just looks like golf poop to them. So that's
I've been using log.error at the app.
good point. We can do that, and that's a good idea.
So it takes in the context and then the rest of the arguments for the string.
So yeah, Todd saw this too.
Log info app.
I think there's an error too.
So the
Yeah, that's a paragraph.
Cool.
It takes into context this first argument.
Thank you. Yeah, so Todd ran into this too. We were trying to debug, and there's a log package in data in the app engine /log, and you can use that for logging statements, and they'll show up in that list I showed you before, and so you can see so just give it some message about this. Sometimes people use a format like something like that, just to make it easier to filter on, but we don't have that much data, so who cares? But all I'm saying is sometimes it's helpful to add information to your string, because you're going to have this huge log, and knowing where it came from and stuff can be a little cumbersome. Okay, so suppose we got the to-do successfully.
All right, so 43 creates what would you call that? An entity, or it's from your struct. You're creating an instance of your struct, right?
Yeah.
Is that how
Yeah.
you say that? 43. And
Yeah.
then 44, it's
Billing.
so you're looping over your query with your iterator, and the for is just an infinite loop.
That's right.
That runs until you either break or return.
So normal, what would happen is you'd get a bunch of nexts, and then this would happen and you break. That would be the normal flow.
And the iterator, so from your query on line 44, it's putting the results into to-do, and the iterator does it know how to match the field names coming in?
Yeah.
So you have the matching field names.
That's
so
right.
It just maps into.
It's like JSON, it uses the names of the fields to things.
Okay.
So there is something I missed here, the key. And this is where what we can do is, if all that worked, we can add, I think it's ID.
There's a dot in code, which
Yeah, no, it's that's where I was getting confused last night.
int ID, that's what we want. It's int 60. And that we can get the ID from the key, put it in the to-do, and that way when we send it to the client, they'll see it.
Yeah. All right, that's what I couldn't figure out last night.
Okay, so what we're missing here is we're not doing anything with the to-do, so I think what we need to do is make a slice of to-do, and then just append it. Everybody follow that?
Yeah.
And then,
I think Q.run needs the context, most likely.
This is where I ended up making two
Like
trays.
43.
Yeah, 2, 3 instead of 2 nodes.
yeah, I guess it's kind of confusing. So we built a list, and to, what do we need to do with the list?
We need to marshal it.
Or use this Indian encoder.
Now, why encoder versus marshal?
Because response is a writer, so you might as well just go to the encoder.
Okay.
It makes it easier to use.
Okay.
We just give it the list.
So marshal will just turn back the JSON, and encoder makes the JSON, writes it.
Yeah, it's like doing the marshalling step in between. Theoretically, and I don't know how true it is for JSON, but for many of those types of encoders, it's streaming the encode. So it's not having to save all of the data and then dump it. It can sort of write it as it goes, and that would be more efficient, theoretically. In this case, it's not going to matter, because we're not going to have millions of to-dos, but if we did have millions of to-dos, it could matter. Because it could write, the bracket, then each item, stream that to the network, not have to fill your memory and then write it. So
In theory, for that, you could even just make, for that theory, you could make the encoder and put the .encode inside the for loop for you more efficient if that was an issue.
yeah, that's a little tricky because JSON itself doesn't play well with that idea,
Yeah.
because you have to have a square bracket
Yeah.
and commas between each item. So if JSON were a little more comfortable with that, you could, but it's just not,
No.
unfortunately. So this can return an error. So we're just going to do the same thing. This may not work because it probably actually can't work. So we'll just not do that. The reason it probably can't work is we've already probably sent data to the client. So we can't then write out response code because we've already done that. So what you'll see in the log is attempt to write headers twice or something. But we can log the error. Error serializing or marshal.
Oh, yeah.
Let's call it that. Okay, so we forget what we're going to do is move the query. We're going to filter based on an email. We'll run the query, and for each one, we'll add it to the list. And then we'll encode the list to the response. So,
Now, what happens if you are just starting this up, or the client has absolutely no to-dos, and so it goes and says, "Give me the to-dos," and gets nothing.
it immediately breaks. You end up with an empty list.
Okay. They get empty.
Yeah, because a filtered, the query can return nothing.
Okay.
And that's valid. Like I said, it would just immediately break.
So the encoding won't be like there's nothing here.
You'll get square brackets.
Okay.
Um,